Hey everyone, Felix from Nintendo Life here, and today we're here to look at the very best RPGs on the Nintendo Switch. So what is an RPG specifically? Does it include action RPGs, turn-based RPGs? Where do you draw the line? I draw the line at yes, and that is why this list is gonna be enormous with 30 plus RPGs of the very best caliber. The list will be in no particular order, so strap in, get your popcorn ready, because we're starting off with a proper bang. Yep, it's Persona 5 Royal. Now this is one of my favorite games of all time, so why is it so great? Well, on one hand, you have the life sim aspect where you go to school, socialize with students, prepare for exams, and you live in the center of Tokyo, so there's loads of activities around every corner. But then on the other hand, you're going into people's cognitive worlds and fighting monsters in these big palaces. It's a really nice dynamic that works super well, and the story is incredibly written. 125 hours it took me to beat, and that was just the main story. It's insane how much stuff this game just keeps introducing throughout the entire playthrough. Definitely check out this game, not only for the brilliant gameplay, but also for the fantastic soundtrack. Those tunes are on constant repeat on my personal playlist. But now that we're talking about Persona, let's also quickly talk about Persona 4 Golden. Now, Persona 4 Golden, instead of taking place in big city Tokyo, takes place in a more rural little town. It has quite a different vibe than Persona 5, but it's still, the Persona that you know and love. You have your life sim with loads of wonderful characters to interact with, a really interesting story, and your dungeon crawler elements where you fight against monsters. And second in line, we have Dragon Quest XI's Echoes of an Elusive Age Definitive Edition. Now that's a title and a half. This is probably the RPG I would recommend for someone who has not quite delved into RPGs before. Not because it's just really simple and all that stuff, but it's just so digestible. I love the story, I love the characters, I just love the feeling of playing this game. You get to go on this grand adventure with lots of lovable characters joining you along for the ride. And you will feel some emotions playing this game, let me tell you. It is a very long game though, so even though I recommend it as someone who hasn't gotten into an RPG before, just keep that in mind. It's a long endeavor, but I also just think it showcases just what RPGs can really achieve, because this is the pinnacle of the bunch. And next up we have Undertale. Now this game, it is something of its own kind. It has 3 different ways you can play this game, which will drastically change the whole experience. You can either go for the neutral playthrough, where you kill some monsters and spare others, go completely pacifist, where you don't kill anyone, or be the butcher that you are and kill everything. And let me tell you, you will feel horrible doing so. I talked about killing and sparing monsters, and yes, you'll be fighting against a lot of foes in this one, but the combat really sets itself apart from, for example, classic turn-based combat. In this one, you have to dodge different patterns from the monsters, and these range from all sorts of stuff depending on who you're battling against. It's a little bullet hell that can be really hard but super satisfying when you learn the patterns and overcome your opponent. Some people hate it, but lots of people love it, and for good reason. And then going from one pixel RPG to the next, we have Golf Story. In Golf Story, you play golf, but it's not just you going around and playing courses and that's the game. No, there's this narrative to it where you have to complete certain challenges, and then you'll go speak to this person and you'll get some quests where you have to go do this, go do that. It's actually really, really fun. Now, normally I'm not the biggest golf person. I mean, I do enjoy golf and Wii Sports, but that's about it. So when I tried out Golf Story, I was pleasantly surprised as just how much story there was. I mean, it is half of the title, but you get what I'm saying. And next in line, we have Xenoblade Chronicles Definitive Edition, Xenoblade Chronicles 2, and Xenoblade Chronicles 3. So yeah, just almost the entire Xenoblade Chronicles franchise. Sorry, Axe, it's not my fault you aren't on Switch yet. All 3 games are masterpieces. I mean, the second one is the one that has the most split fan base, so people either really don't like it or they just love it. Where 1 and 3 are more like well regarded by everyone as being some of the best games ever made. Personally, I would suggest starting with the first one and just going through them. That's at least what I'm doing. I really like the first game, but I also think you could just play these in any order if one entices you more than the other. There might just be some references that you don't exactly get. But what are these games exactly? Well, it's these grand adventures. The story will take twists and turns that will leave you at the edge of your seat with beautiful sceneries for your eyes and lovely music for your ears. It's such a grand, epic feeling running around on these giants feeling so tiny and then fighting these monsters to reach your destiny. Next up, we have Divinity Original Sin 2 Definitive Edition. This game was created by the Baldur's Gate 3 developers, so it's probably the closest we'll get to Baldur's Gate 3 on the Switch since it shares a lot of similar DNA. It's very highly regarded. It has a rich and interesting cast, expansive character creator, and well, is turn-based just like Baldur's Gate 3. Yeah, there's a lot of similarities as you can see on the footage here, so if you enjoyed Baldur's Gate 3, chances are you'll probably also enjoy this one. Next up, we have Nier Automata The End of Yora Edition. Because this is a game you'd want to go in as blind as possible, I'm going to be a bit sparse on details to avoid spoilers. This is a game that if you've never played it, you just owe it to yourself. Every time you think you know where the game or story is going, it pulls the rug out from under you. It raises some genuine ethical questions repeatedly and is shown from myriad perspectives. The combat is great fun, beautiful soundtrack, and the Switch port is genuinely really good. So if you're looking to spice up your game collection with something maybe a bit dystopian, Nier Automata The End of Yora Edition is a very good bet. Then we have Bravely Default 2, a follow-up to the original Bravely Default on 3DS, and not to be confused with Bravely Second. While these are also available on PC, this is an otherwise Switch console exclusive. The gameplay here is classic turn-based combat, and it uses a job system, so there's plenty of customization to be had with your party. The visuals are really pretty on Switch, great lighting effects, and almost has a puppet-like appearance of characters, which makes this one really unique. The next game though also has a really unique art style, and it's Disco Elysium: The Final Cut. This is a very adult game with very serious topics, but it is incredible and has a very good narrative. When we say it's an adult game, we mean in the sense that it is genuinely mature as well as gritty and at times grotesque. There's so much voice acting in this game. Constant internal monologues of the different parts of Harry, the main character's psyche, are endlessly amusing, dark, worrying, and insightful. It's a point-and-click adventure, and you also have chance-based outcomes to decisions you make that can have unexpected and/or hilarious results. There's so many branching paths that you can play 10 times and not even see everything. Yeah, loads and loads of content, and it's such a unique experience. Definitely not for everyone, but the people I know who it's clicked with say it's one of the best games they've ever played. Then we have Live Alive, which finally came to the West when it came to Switch back in 2022. See, this was originally an old game that released for the Super Famicom, so they completely remade it with the Octopath Traveler HD 2D visuals. I mean, that also makes sense because this was recreated by the same team that made Octopath Traveler. Think of this as 7 unique small stories. Each of the stories have different scenarios, different characters, and these can last anywhere from 30 minutes to a few hours. Perfect for pick up and play on the Switch. It has lots of memorial set pieces and rarely overstays its welcome either. And no, we're still not sure if it's Live Alive or Live Alive. But yeah, we'll let you decide down in the comments. The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt Complete Edition, one of those miracle ports on Switch. It's in my top 5 video games of all time. It is so special. There's so many quests to delve into, a fantastic story, and loads of characters who will have a different fate depending on what choices you make. The world is humongous, with different parts of the world having very different feels. Velen is a mud bath where you get to experience peasants not having the best living conditions. But then you go to Skellige and it feels like an entirely different game. And if you enjoy the base game, well, there's also 2 giant DLCs included, especially the second one, Blood and Wine. There you get an entire new map that feels nothing like anything else in the game. It could almost be a sequel to The Witcher 3, but no, it's just a DLC and it's included in this complete edition. So really, don't sleep on this game. It's incredible how they even managed to get it running on Switch because it is a really big adventure with lots of monsters to be slain and monster contracts to be completed. Now, I know I said before that Divinity was probably the closest we'll get to Baldur's Gate 3 on Switch, but if we look aside from the gameplay and look at the titles, well, we do have something that is very similar, being Baldur's Gate and Baldur's Gate 2 Enhanced Editions. They have superb storylines, too, especially, and these games are just the definitive computer RPG. They have massive nostalgia for old farts like Alex. His words, not mine. So yeah, just be aware that this is not made by the same people who made Baldur's Gate 3, so the combat, for example, is quite different. And speaking of combat, why don't we talk about a game that has the most gruesome of them all? It's Dark Souls Remastered. It's the original Dark Souls, and it's hard as nails to new players. Storyline might be baffling to newcomers, but that mystery is a big part of the appeal. It's tremendously rewarding when you finally get the hang of it, and you can have varied playstyles, providing replayability. A downside to this one is that the B button is used to accept in menus because, well, the devs are insane. Well, then we have Pokemon Legends Arceus. This game was really a breath of fresh air for the franchise. There's just something so comfy about roaming around in this game. You don't need to enter a battle every time you need to catch a Pokemon, because you just see them in the overworld, you throw a Pokeball, and then hope that everything just works out. Now, the game is set back in the past, where Pokemon and people still hadn't figured out how to live together. Your village base is all very, ancient looking, and all your tools, even the Pokeballs, have this ancient look. A downside of this game can be the graphic department, because it doesn't always run particularly well and the textures are quite muddy, but if you can overlook that part, you'll have a legendary time with this game. If you enjoy Studio Ghibli, you're gonna love this next game. It's Ni no Kuni: Wrath of the White Witch. And while the game itself is not made by Studio Ghibli, they did animate the cutscenes and the music was co-composed by Joe Hisashi. But who did develop this game? Well, it was Level 5, and that might ring a bell if you know the Professor Layton games. This is a delightful, action-ish RPG suitable for all ages. You go on a big quest to save your mom, and there'll be loads of enemies to fight on your way. This game also has a disproportionately high Welsh representation, likely inspired by Miyazaki's fondness for the region. Now, there's also a second game, but we've decided not to include it officially on this list just because it is very different and unfortunately not as good. But the first one, yeah, that's brilliant. Then we have Shin Megami Tensei 5 Vengeance. It's a monster collecting RPG, kind of like Persona, but without the social life and with much more punishing turn-based combat. Think the heavy metal obsessed sibling of the family. What's special about this Vengeance portion? Well, first off, it just means that it's an expanded edition of the original Shin Megami Tensei 5, and it includes everything from the original, but has a new alternate storyline that brings in multiple new and colorful characters. And then we have Diablo 3 Eternal Collection. This is a classic in terms of its game style, but what type of game style is it? Well, it's a dungeon crawler with ludicrous synergy and exploitative abilities, which are great fun. It also has a co-op mode, so if you're looking for a game to play with your pal, well, this is a very good shout. It can get a bit repetitive at times and has some performance issues, but if endlessly scouting for loot is your thing, you're unlikely to go wrong here. Coming up, we have Star Ocean: The Second Story R. This is a remake of the second Star Ocean game, and Square Enix has a new take on the HD 2D art style. It's a bit more choppy and really gorgeous to look at. A cool thing about this game is that in the start, you either choose to play as Claude or Rena, and then you play from their perspective the entire game. The combat is real-time combat, and there's some nice new additions to the combat in this remake. Your actions throughout the game will also change which allies you'll be able to bring along with you on your adventure. Like a lot of JRPGs, you don't need to play the first one. I mean, it is a direct sequel, it takes place 20 years after the first game, but you can definitely enjoy this one without playing the first one. Ooh, this is a big one. It's Elder Scrolls V Skyrim. It's the classic Bethesda RPG, a culmination of what Bethesda have been working towards for decades, if divisive in some areas. It's a pioneer of the open world genre, and it's absolutely enormous. you'll definitely get a lot of bang for your buck because there's hundreds of hours of stuff to do. It also has the character Maik the Liar, who is the best character just in general. So yeah, that's just a little nice cherry on top. Y ahora tenemos Monster Hunter Rise. Sorry, I forgot to turn my English on. This is an evolution of the Monster Hunter series that also takes a step back from Monster Hunter World in the right ways. It gets incredibly tough as things progress, but it's always pushing you to evolve your strategies and gear. The wire bug makes movement an absolute joy, and the continuous map makes hunting way more pleasant. You can also get some friends to play alongside you so you can take down the big bad monsters together, and that is where the game really shines. But when you're all gone and done with this game, but you're still looking for more Monster Hunter, you can also delve into Monster Hunter Generations. And next in line, we have Dragon's Dogma Dark Arisen. This is an enhanced version of the original Dragon's Dogma released back in 2012. And if you don't know what this is, think Skyrim but for even nerdier people. It's much more story-driven, much more darker, and it's closer to a traditional action RPG. Combat is hugely enjoyable, which is never a given for the genre, and the vocation system encourages you to change up how you play and evolve your pawn, your player character, by including new abilities and techniques unlocked gradually as you progress. So if you saw everyone talking about Dragon's Dogma 2 but you didn't have the console to play it on, well, you can see if the series is something for you with this first entry. It is time to talk about my favorite game of all time, The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. Don't worry, we'll also talk about Tears of the Kingdom. Where do we even start with Breath of the Wild? It was such a landmark in gaming, and so many other games have tried to replicate what this game did so brilliantly. You play as Link, who's been asleep for the past 100 years, and now the kingdom has fallen to ruin. You feel very isolated in this game. There's not that many towns or NPCs, so a lot of the time you just go around with your own thoughts, battle against some monsters, or do some puzzles in a shrine. This game is just magical. It brings up feelings with me that I just don't think I can replicate with any other game, but I do know that for some, Tears of the Kingdom is even better than Breath of the Wild, and for good reason. Tears of the Kingdom not only adds 2 new layers to the map, being the depths and Sky Islands, but also Link's abilities are completely changed. In Breath of the Wild, you had magnesis, you had the bombs, but in this one you can fuse weapons together, ascend through the ceiling, and make your own vehicles. Yeah, both games are just enormous, both are masterpieces that you absolutely must try out if you haven't already, if you have a Switch. I could look at this all day. The next game we're going to be talking about is Chained Echoes. In this game, you're going to be controlling loads of different characters, and the art style is this very lovely SNES type visual, not exactly like the HD 2D art style, but very faithful to how it was back in the day, while still looking modern and slick. It's a solo-developed passion project by Matthias Linde, and it really shows. It is excellently written, the combat has some really nice gimmicks, and you'll follow this big grand story about war, betrayal, and friendship. Do you have any games where you feel like they're overhyped? Well, Paper Mario: The Thousand Year Door is not one of them because it deserves all the hype it gets. I got to try this game for the first time this year with the remake, and it ended up being one of my favorite games I've ever played. It's not often where I pick up a game and just cannot put it down until I finish it, but this was one of them. The characters and writing is absolutely hilarious, the combat is unique and really engaging, and the story is always shaking things up to keep things interesting throughout the entire playthrough. Now before, I did not understand why people were so mad about where the Paper Mario series went, but after playing this one, I can understand them because this is absolute peak. I mean, I really enjoyed the Origami King, but after playing the Thousand Year Door, yeah, I don't want to play with you anymore. So if you haven't played the Thousand Year Door, please do so because it is just such a wonderful, magical experience. And staying on the topics of a Mario RPG, we have Super Mario RPG. I mean, it's right there in the title. This is also a really fun RPG, a more classic RPG. Personally, I think it's a bit inferior to the Thousand Year Door, but I had a really good time, and it was also one of those games that I picked up, I played, and didn't put it down until I was done. When fighting monsters, that is done in classic turn-based combat, but they had some really good inclusions in this one that has seen its fair share of reiterations throughout the years, the biggest one being action commands. time the button presses to your attacks or the enemy's attacks, and you can either do more damage or completely negate an incoming attack. And they got so much correct right out of the box. It introduced Mario having a hammer, which is now a staple in Mario RPGs, and the writing and witty humor set a good example for future Mario endeavors. So in my personal opinion, you should actually play RPG first and the Thousand Year Door after, because if you do it the other way around, you might end up being disappointed on all the stuff that is maybe a little bit inferior in this game. Octopath Traveler 2 is one of those games that takes what makes the original really good and just improves on all aspects. In this one, you'll again play as 8 different travelers, but they have a more interconnected story. One of the main criticisms of the first game was that all the characters were on this grand adventure together, but nothing really interlinked, and that they have fixed in this one with shared story paths. Now, characters 2 and 2 will go in small stories together, and this is just such a lovely addition. Another lovely addition is that you can now switch freely between day and nighttime. This not only just changes the visuals, the music will also have a different variation depending on what time of day it is, and the monsters will be stronger at night. It's just a fantastic time with lots of variation in the 8 different storylines, brilliant turn-based combat, and a soundtrack that can at times leave you quite emotional. And next up, we have the Final Fantasy games. Now on the Switch, we have Final Fantasy 1 through 12 minus 11, and you really can't go wrong with any of them. But if you need some recommendations, we would go with 4, 6, and 7. Some of the games may not hold up as well today, but they're like comfort food for many. These games have incredible stories and graphics that defined their generation. And don't worry, you don't have to start from one end and then make your way through the games. These are all self-contained adventures with brand new characters. I know it was a bit cheeky to just say the Final Fantasy series, but there's just such a variety that it is hard to choose, and I didn't want to anger anyone with not including their favorite Final Fantasy game on this list. Just pick the one that intrigues you the most. It's Final Fantasy, it's great, bish bash bosh. And lastly, we have Sea of Stars. Now this was Sabotage Studios' second game, the first one being The Messenger, so they have a pretty good track record. In this game you play as Sail and Valerie, who are Solstice warriors. And you'll be joined by your friend and cook, Garl, all trying to defeat the evils of the Night Dweller. It might be a bit slow in the start, but when it gets going, oh boy, does it get going. Seriously, one of the best looking games I've ever seen. The pixel art is superb and the lighting effects is done so that it has a full day and night cycle. The combat is also a really big highlight of this game. Very seamless, so you just bump into an enemy and you fight then and there. There's no loading screen into the battle. It's all really, really cool and so very snappy. And there you have it. Those were the very best RPGs on the Switch. Were there any that we missed? Yes, of course, because there's a bajillion RPGs on the Switch, but we had to pick and choose, and unfortunately, some just didn't make the cut. So let us know down in the comments below which ones you really like that you didn't see in this video. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to check out our website, nintendolove.com, where you can find all sorts of lists like best RPGs or best action RPGs in written form. And don't forget to click that subscribe button if you've ever played an RPG. Ha! Got you there. Now you have to click. Alright then, stay safe, play some RPGs, and we'll see you in the next one. Felix from Nintendo Live, out.